Thanks everybody, and thanks to the Triple Play guys for having me along today. My name is Mike Bohndiek. I'm the Managing Director at PTI Consulting, and at PTI we look after technology strategy and technology management for 20 clubs and venues across the UK and Ireland, helping people think about the roadmap, where they're heading with things, and ultimately where technology connects and how we can use it to leverage commercial return. What we're talking about today in particular is the importance of the approach when we're looking at commercial return. We've had several conversations with people around the outside of the room today, very much focused around, I want to do something but I can't get the sign off, or I'm struggling with the budget, or how do we build a case and items around it. So going to be looking to sort of give some tips and some thoughts on how we're trying to achieve that in the marketplace at the moment. But just as a starting point, just to sort of take an abstract and a step back, PTI ourselves held an event a couple of months ago, and we sent out a pre-event survey ahead of that, where we were looking at how was the market doing, what were people looking at, and we had about 90 odd people coming along and looking at where we were at as a marketplace and where things were, and ultimately the first question we asked was where are you on the journey? Where does technology actually sit for you at the moment? And only people from clubs and venues could reply. So the elements we get here, you see the average being at 30, but quite a high spike, being right down at the bottom in sort of that first 10 to 15%. Lots of us are considering where we're at on our journey and that we need to start a technology journey. And I guess the interesting piece for today and the details around that is we asked people what they wanted us to speak about, and the number one thing they wanted us to speak about was digital signage. What are we doing in stadia on match day? What are we doing around the stadium? What are we doing out of ground? What are we doing on the way to it? How are we using digital signage across the platforms, across the piece? So we've obviously heard a lot of pieces around some of that and the Triple Play roadmap today. We've also seen a lot of the booths around the outside having some thoughts on it, but it's obviously something that's quite important to the marketplace at the moment. We're seeing the break from a traditional model in digital signage and how people consume it and how people sell it as well as a piece. Then we asked the people about fan experience overall, and as I said, from a wider and an abstract point of view, what were people looking to achieve, where were they trying to get to, and speed and F&B and service and delivery were absolutely critical to people as a part of that. And I think the two things almost lead together a little bit. There's several people that I'd spoken to earlier in the room today who've integrated digital signage with EPOS and F&B and using it dynamically to look at how they yield and what they do. So some very clear connections with it. We're obviously in what is undoubtedly the best stadium on the market at the moment. So it pains me somewhat as an Arsenal fan to say that, but can't compete with the facts of what we've got around us as this piece. But fundamentally, where are we still looking? We're still looking at the States as an industry to where we find what we consider to be the latest innovations and things that are going on as a piece. So I guess the challenge in the room today and the challenge for the roundtables afterwards is what could we learn from each other as a UK market to help leverage and make some of those elements grow. But what do people expect with technology, and why is it a challenge? I've shamelessly stolen this from many presentations over many years, most recently Ben Wells at our event, talking about things and the importance of connectivity, the importance of technology and what that means in terms of people's experience and how we get that right. And it comes into the same sort of things as we're talking about with our fans and considering in our stadiums for match days and thinking about as part of the core fan experience. And really where we got to and where we sort of start this presentation in earnest were the 8 key questions that came out from that survey and from that event that people in the industry were asking of themselves when it comes to technology. First one was, how do I get that ROI from it? How do I justify the case? And this was across a broad range of spectrum. That was, how do I deploy stadium Wi-Fi? How do I invest in new signage? How do I get the ROI on my app, a new till system, etc. Everyone's asking that question. Little focus on the total cost of the ownership. And again, we've had several conversations with people in that way. We often end up in a CapEx race. And because we end up in a CapEx race, we're struggling with the budget. We compromise on the outcomes. And the phrase I use often with clubs when we're looking at these sorts of things is, are we spending 3 fivers instead of a tenner? Because you end up with a death by 1,000 cuts approach. People want to squeeze down the cost of a project, you start compromising on something, you don't have to recable it or you don't have to redo it, and every time you do something like that, the cost goes up. We all want to be engaging new fans, we all want to be finding new people, we all want to be retaining new people, and seeing how that goes in the marketplace across the piece. Fundamentally, a lack of understanding as to where technology should sit and what it should actually achieve. What are we trying to get out of technology? How many people have got a connected technology strategy sat behind things that will then actually help them to generate some of these outcomes? I've got to read this one. Short-term focus as we go into there. A lack of buy-in from senior stakeholders, which is often a challenge for people looking to get that budget signed off. We've had conversations with a few people today with the fleeting nature of ownership and chief execs being in the business and wanting to sign something off or having the capacity to sign something off. So the question there always becomes, how do I sell this in an elevator pitch? How do I make this investment pitch 5 minutes long while I've still got the attention of the people that I need in order to sign this off? This is stolen from my colleague Eric, who's formerly at Roma as a piece, who talks about technology being a journey with no destination. It's moving so fast, it's hard for us to start to roadmap and start to think about things if we're abstract or we're just one business unit or one silo department. So when do you start to invest? How do you get over the problem that if you invested a year ago, would you still make the same investment decision today? How do you ring fence CapEx spend and do the classic of sort of future proofing? And fundamentally, how does technology sit together? How do the layers of technology that we talk about actually help you bring one overall piece? So talking of technology approach, and this is really sort of the focus from my point of view on some of the session here, and then we're going to go into just a couple of the challenges in a little bit more detail and sort of how we perceive the common answers at the moment, and then some of the ways we're trying to combat it. But fundamentally, from a technology point of view, we believe everything needs to link itself back to a business strategy or a business objective, which sounds unbelievably simple, but is fundamentally missed in quite a lot of business cases that we see get put forward for things. So we take the next filter down and say, well, a business objective or a strategy will always be looking to achieve one of commercial growth or operational efficiency. That'll be the mainstay of what we're trying to achieve, and therefore the technology strategy that we are writing or we are helping to deliver can help support one or more of those two pieces. We're being informed by the business as a technology unit as to how we're going to help that, but we're also informing back as to what we know from a specialism point of view and how we can avoid some of those double costs or avoid that 3 fivers instead of a tenner mentality for it. And then we see technology across 4 layers, and this is where we very deliberately use the phrase of technology as opposed to the phrase of IT and how people would see that previously. So for us, everything starts and ends with data. And the simple answers for that really, someone buying a ticket, registering for the ticketing system, buying a ticket, it starts with data going into that system, ends with management information coming out the back about how many tickets you sold, what you've done, etc. as a simple example. To get data, you need applications. You need to have something providing that, a system and a base that can allow you to get it. To have applications that work, you need infrastructure. And that's probably more where your classic IT elements sit, from servers, cables, and the stuff that's back of house. But for that to work, you need connectivity. And really what we're looking for here, as I build it there, is we're looking for that to be a pyramid as an approach. And what we tend to find, though, is that the top 2 layers, they're understood. People have a handle on those. The retail manager has an understanding of the retail system. The ticketing manager has an understanding of the ticketing system. Your AV manager has an understanding of the signage solution in silos and in pieces. But they have that understanding because that's the thing they use. That's what they log into. That's what they use day in, day out. People understand data and they understand those top 2 layers, particularly as technology, because we use those at home. Right? Technology is our Alexa device. It might be a Ring doorbell. It might be a smart speaker, it might be your iPhone, etc. We use those every day. But where we get lost is that infrastructure and connectivity for people in commercial sides of the business can often be a bit of a dark art and often cause a bit of confusion and a bit of a challenge. So we'll give an example from one of our clients when we first started with them. They've done the top part of this really quite well. They've decided they were going to go with a pre-ordering food and beverage app, so it kind of links back to the research and what do people want to do. They wanted to improve that. And they had 2 drivers. The ops director had the driver that his queues at half time were infringing on green guide requirements for what was going on in terms of distance from exits and items like that. Commercial director obviously wanted to sell more pints. No rocket science behind that. So they'd been through that, they'd identified that technology could help them with it, so they went straight to an application provider. In that business at the time, there was no tech team. Nothing happening internally from a tech perspective. Application provider sells them the app, gets to match day, app doesn't work. Now what you've got is the challenge of the marketing that you've done around having this app. You've sold it to the fans, you've sold them the journey no longer works. Why? because at that stage that club had less fibre, less connectivity in their stadium than I had in my house. There was no understanding of what was happening at the bottom end of that spectrum, and that house, well, house minus one, layer of connectivity was powering analysts, it was powering the media, it was trying to power part of the OB compound, it was trying to do the signage, and of course it was creaking and falling over, no connectivity, no journey, big problems. They've done the top half of this really well, clear thought, clear business logic, clear objective stats, didn't understand the bottom part of the pyramid. So what often we find in clubs as we come through to this is that technology becomes a diamond, and there are a wealth of people in the industry at the moment who've been through that diamond effect. We've got less infrastructure than you need to support your applications, you've got less connectivity than you need to support your infrastructure. But we're then sceptical about how technology is actually going to influence them. The people who grew through the sort of the 2000s in that market, who saw stadium Wi-Fi pop out and be sort of a thing for the first time. Nearly everyone who played in the early 2000s with stadium Wi-Fi got burnt by the bottom half of that pyramid becoming a diamond and not understanding what was happening in those high density environments. At the time, Wi-Fi was a much different proposition than it is now, both technically and from a cost perspective. But if you're the commercial director who previously signed up a £1 million Wi-Fi deal that fundamentally didn't work for you, the next person who comes in to talk about tech over a period of time isn't going to land with the same sort of impetus into the business case. So really we help people sit back and help them to generate the ways and the knowledge and the understanding as to how this will actually work when it's deployed. It's fundamentally when we're looking for budget, when we're looking for the business case, giving the assurance that it will actually work in practice in your stadium, not the nice deck, not the nice demo you had on a Thursday afternoon when there were 15 people in the office. It will work when there are 30 to 60,000 people in your stadium on a Saturday. That's very much the key kind of piece from this as a takeaway, is to consider it holistically from a technology point of view, to make sure you cover those pieces, which is then going to guarantee that that solution actually works in practice, and that's what's going to help you actually deliver the ROI case that you're putting forwards. So I'm just going to go through a couple of challenges that I'm sure will all sort of resonate with people into the room there. What are we tasked with as commercial side of the business? We've got to use more revenue generating areas. We've got to generate fundamentally more commercial return from that. And one of the ways we get into that diamond rather than a pyramid in the first place is that when we get into value engineering, when we're building stadia, when we're refreshing hospitality lounges, what we will tend to do is look at everything per square metre. And the per square metre will have a value against it, and it'll either have a plus or a minus. And your kitchen space, your storage space, your tech space will have a minus, because that is not revenue generating, and anything that's got a hospitality chair, a round table on it, will have a plus next to it. And when you're over budget and you're looking for value engineering, you go and take out all the minuses. You just try and strip those back, maximise the pluses, balances your books. Downside of that is, of course, you've then not actually got the capability to go on and deliver the experience that you wanted to give someone in a premium lounge. And we see a lot from a premium point of view, using that as the use case. A lot of people sell the vision to the customer and then run out of money in the journey between sale and completion, and then deliver a product that's slightly substandard compared to what they've sold. And then you get the fan disillusionment, you get the misalignments, and then you're fundamentally retrofitting back in the first place. So here is the outlier of an exception with how well future-proof they are. For those who went on the tour earlier on, you would have seen their comms room downstairs, which is only about 50% full at this stage, so plenty of room for them to grow and be able to deliver it. Same with the number of ports and items you see around on the walls, that only about 30% of them available at any one time, so you can move things around, you can open up a different bar, you can reconfigure the rooms, you've got that flexibility. So just think about that bottom half of the layer, and when we started to do projects where we might be working with a catering company, thinking about how we're going to do ordering from tables, and we're thinking about how we're selling hospitality, we've got to consider technology at that stage to really start to help. Second challenge, as we touched earlier on, we need to attract new fans and affect the wider world experience that they have. But one of the ways we often try to get around the ROI problem is to commercialise it. We'll look to go sponsorship-led to achieve the things that are much larger. So go back to your classic example on Wi-Fi, the guy who was there in the early 2000s who spent that £1 million, who got stung by it and doesn't want to sign it off again, so you go, right, we're going to just net this off, commercial deal in, Wi-Fi out, and therefore we might have given away some rights on the Wi-Fi, we might not get the data, etc., but we're going to get the deal. But what often happens with those is that the technical due diligence on those fails, because they're fundamentally being led by non-technical people, and that is with no disrespect at all to any commercial colleagues or items like that. It's fundamentally in those same businesses, as per the app example, where they had less fibre than the house. Putting Wi-Fi over the top of things simply isn't going to work unless you architect it right from the base and work it right up. So again, got to consider how we solve the challenge of ROI, and sponsorship can be a way forward, but make sure you've got a bridging gap in between for people who are actually thinking about the technological answer, so that you get the outcomes that you're looking for. Talk about the short-term focus and items in there. What does the system look like post-launch? Ticketing systems are a bugger for this one, where you generally have a much longer-term contract with people. You're signing up 5, 7, some cases seen a club sign up to a 9-year ticketing deal recently, and looking at those sorts of things. So we think about the capex of that up front. We think about the immediacy of it, but perhaps not what that's going to cost us into the future. Wi-Fi is another example as we go into it. We might take away the capex up front, we'll deliver Wi-Fi into you for free. What do you lose from your OPEX budget on an ongoing basis? Is there commercial revenue you're now missing out on, but you've got something over the line which felt like a really good idea at the time? These are the easy things that you can start to think about and be slightly more abstract with, that can avoid you making that investment that isn't going to pay back. As we say, a lot of it is trying to negate that as a challenge. And then generally there's a lack of understanding as to what technology actually wants to achieve. What do we want to do collectively from it? Because we're all so siloed, and football clubs, rugby clubs, cricket clubs even, we are naturally siloed. We have specialists in lots of different areas. Broadcast specialists, we have media specialists, we have digital engagement specialists, we have tech people, etc. How well are they connected as a journey to do something overall for the club and overall for the fan, as opposed to in silo? And one of the things we do a lot with our clients is put in governance committees for technology, which then mean major spend has to go through a group process, which is heads of department from various areas combining together. We ran one with a client recently who figured out that 3 people were working on the same project from different angles, all in relation to an app. So it's an app cuts across many layers of those sorts of pieces. A head of digital might be involved in that, a tech person might be involved in that, digital marketing might be involved in that, commercial might be doing a deal where there's an output of a venue app coming at the other end, or items like that. But actually they're all working on the same project, just didn't know they were all doing it. When I was at one club as an employee, the chief scout and the chief analyst both bought the same Optifeed. Sat in the room next door to each other, were separated by a very, very thin wall, but both spent 40 grand a year on exactly the same data feed. Just didn't realise they were both buying it, nor did the CFO. It was just a line item in a budget. It happens. Get that piece looked at in a way. So thinking onto solutions and some potential solutions there, we're starting to think centrally. One of the things that we spend a lot of time doing is helping a business collectively have a set of filters against which technology can be procured, a set of reasons as to why we were going to do it. We've got some notional examples up on the screen here. Things like, very simple but very high level, does it make it easier to buy from? Does it improve something else for us as a fan base? Does it improve our standing in the local community? Does it help us engage with that local community? Where do we want it to go? What's it going to achieve fundamentally? And simply the decision-making process then goes, if it doesn't hit 5 of the 7 or 3 of the 5, whichever it may be, in those examples, then we simply don't buy it. And when you combine that with governance around centrally viewing how you're spending on technology as a club or a venue, you'll very quickly find you're not trying to spend as much money as you think you are. You'll start to narrow down the scope and the focus of the projects and the deliverables that are coming within it, because you know it's ticking the box. And what happens with these in particular, when we go back to the first set of questions and first set of challenges around how do I get my senior stakeholders to buy in, once they've signed these off once, they're then decentralised. And your spend approval elements become far easier because you're ticking a box that's been delivered by the board, been signed off by the board as an approach and as a strategy to help you procure technology. So it's going to help to decentralise it, and maybe those fleeting 5-minute conversations are suddenly much more reasonable hour-long conversations with a head of department or a director as opposed to the chief exec or a CFO coming through to deliver. To use digital ticketing as the example for there, again, it comes back to thinking about things from a central point of view. Can we tick more than one box? Does this help more than one of those silos to deliver on what's going on? We've got the example up there on digital ticketing from a ticket office perspective, from a fan perspective, from a operational perspective, from a data capture perspective. Digital ticketing at the moment is very much what cashless was sort of 2 years ago. People are moving into that space because we're seeing the benefits of anti-tout, anti-fraud, capturing the other three bookers when you've got one person buying four, understanding transient fan base, getting more demographic data, helping people drive people into the app, generating commercial return from advanced digital inventory within that app or within that stadium, or increasing dwell times. And we all see that collectively each of the departments has a small win across implementing digital ticketing, and that's why the number of vendors in that space has gone up so dramatically over the last 2 or 3 years. That's why the number of venues adopting it over the last 2 or 3 years is spiking up as well. And you follow various industry newsletters, you'll find that pretty much one a week at the moment is announcing somewhere that they've gone into digital ticketing and they're transforming their business on that behalf. So it ticks more than one box. It's an easier business case because we all understand how we win. And fundamentally, is it actually what the fan wants? Again, using the digital ticketing example, where else do you use digital ticketing? Well, largely airports. A few people in from overseas and items like that at the moment. If you can leave the country using your mobile phone, why can't I get into the stadium on the same basis? We're setting expectation levels in the wider world that we as Stadia have to start to try and meet. So we can put together a case, an ROI case for technology spend that's been through the filters that say, actually, we know exactly why we're achieving it. Each of our business units knows where they're winning from it and how we're going to split that budget into various departments and where the ROI is going to go. And we've sense checked it with the fans themselves. Everyone's got user forums and other groups that they can use in that way. But fundamentally, what are the fans expecting from a wider world perspective? Then we're in a really, really solid place to be starting to talk about how we sign off that cash, because there's so many wins across the business that even if half of them failed, you'd still be making, you'd still be into the positive. So fundamentally, the split from a technology point of view, technology is a service department as we see it, in exactly the same way that HR or finance would be doing it. And really how we split it with clients is the business units, your ticketing, retail, etc., look after the what and the why. Those guys are the specialists. They understand their areas better than the technologists will be able to understand them. From a detailed P&L perspective, from what they want to achieve, how they want to achieve it. But fundamentally, the how and the when, from a technological point of view, comes back through that governance process, comes back via the tech team out in the business supporting that business unit in the decision that they're making. And in that way, the tech team are no longer threatening, perhaps, from a perspective of why are they treading on my toes, why are they involved in this area, because they're simply a service department in the same way that finance or HR are. Across the business, and what that really helps to generate is the right kinds of outcomes from the right kind of thought going into it. The technology for technology's sake. You know, we're technologists. We get excited by technology. That is our remit. So we need tapering down from the business unit to do the what and the why. But the business unit fundamentally won't necessarily understand the how and the when of that working. And as a result of that, if you take the business unit running all of that, that's where your application layer swells out. Because you buy another retail system, you buy another piece. We did some consultancy for a Premier League football club in a couple of years ago now. They had 178 systems across their estate. Did not know they had 178 systems. Thought they had 60 to 70. But you go and speak to the supporters club liaison officer. She's bought a system that holds all the membership ballot information for the supporters club. So that's got data in it. You come back to compliance and a much wider technology perspective. That's a challenge. How many systems are there? Where are they hosted? How are we using them? Is that the reason that Wi-Fi piece went down on match day in the media suite? We start to unpick some of those challenges by splitting that what and why and how and when, and we really get into a much better spot. So as a brief summary, before I open it up to the floor, the fundamentals from our point of view, that sound technology investment can generate those business updates and those business benefits. There are lots of people who are scared of that technology investment, and the fear comes from the lack of knowledge as to what it's actually going to achieve at the end and how it's actually going to influence the things that we're talking about. Everyone is talking about fan experience, customer engagement, new fan retention. Everyone's looking to that fearful next Premier League deal for, is it going to go to Amazon, is it going to be digital, how is it going to affect my stadium, my market? And really what we're saying to people at the moment is you've got to solve the problem today. If we take an abstract off the back of that, 4G, 5G, Wi-Fi as an abstract, as a simple one. Lots of people we've spoken to recently say, I'm not going to go down the Wi-Fi routes because 5G is going to come and solve all my problems. It's going to be quicker, it's going to deliver this, it's going to deliver that. So yes, but where is it at the moment in reality? We've got a lot of noise from EE with the FA Cup final, a lot of noise from Vodafone with Lewis Hamilton and their launch. But in reality, there are only 8 live scenarios where that actually works, and you pretty much have to stand under the mast to get that to deliver the speeds that you're looking for. Latest Deloitte report on 5G shows that by 2025, only 50% of the nation will have a 5G enabled phone through some of the challenges of the pricing and the structures and the device plans that will come off the back of that. So even if you're waiting for 5G, if you can only serve it to half your stadium when you get there, it's not going to be the solution you actually need. From that point of view, if you have a 4G problem today, you've got a 4G problem to solve. So we need to think about what is it actually going to influence, how are we going to get the upside out, and think about it into the future as a piece. We have to consider it holistically. We all want the outcomes. If you think from a sponsorship point of view, let's take a classic betting partner. What do they get out of sponsoring a football club as a piece? They fundamentally want the data. They want to understand who's betting on what, when, how, why. They want to know what their return is on that. They want people to market to. That's data. What have they got? They've got an app. They've got applications they want to deploy into your stadium, be that the way in which a fan downloads the app themselves directly to their phone, or be that iPad-led devices, people going and doing in-box betting or various items like that. Both of those things, again, need infrastructure, need backhaul to be able to actually achieve that. So that's where that blend between commercial and sponsorship and technology and delivery really starts to hit in and generate the answers, where IT no longer has to say no to the business. And I guess that's why we use the word technology and not the words IT, because IT is classically, in sports and stadiums, been seen as the blocker to commercial growth. People want to do other things, they want to do call activations. We're seeing AR, VR, a lot of stuff over in the States recently on that in the NFL. And if someone says in the UK, well, can we do that? Well, actually no, because my server infrastructure hasn't been invested into. No, because we haven't got enough connectivity. Or actually, I don't know, because we haven't got anyone here who knows the answer to the question. And those are the reasons where, if you don't know the answer to the question, seek the help to make sure it's going to deliver the items that it comes through. So fundamentally, from our point of view, the key takeaways really, consider it holistically across those layers, help the business by connecting with technology and using it as a service department, and it can be achieved. There are examples of it now being out there and achieved, and delivering the outcomes that we're looking for. So yeah, ultimately, consider it holistically, and make sure you've got the expertise in the business that can actually sign off the business case, take it through to completion, and help you generate the ROI. So that's all from me. Any questions from the floor?